take it. Morgan going in, and West Morgan heads it in. They'll level. Leicester hit back like champions.
Manchester United did not cope with it, and this was all about power, about determination. He just floats it in, Danny Drinkwater. Rojo just cannot deal with him, and from that distance, as long as he gets good contact, it's so difficult for De Gea.
Well, there were absolute scenes with Leicester lifting the Premier League trophy, or they will be lifting the trophy this weekend against Everton, but they've secured the title against absolutely astronomical odds, 5,000 to 1 at the start of the season you could get, and two people who are absolutely beside themselves and pinching themselves to see if this is actually real life. Fryer Tuck and Jatz joining me for this special Leicester talk.
Hey, ODA.
Hey.
So I'll start with the first question, and I just wanted to take you back a few seasons now to a season when you were managed by Mr. Ian Holloway, who managed to get you relegated from the Football League Championship for the first time in your history. You were in League One, and the club appointed Nigel Pearson as your manager. So I just wanted to get each of your thoughts on first of all, how difficult it was and how much of a struggle it was following the club in League One, and how you felt, where you felt the club was going to end up, and whether you saw any light at the end of the tunnel. I'll start with Jatz.
Yeah, it's a difficult period, wasn't it? We were kind of... it's never good to get relegated in any league, let alone kind of going down to a brand new low for us. So it was obviously quite a shock to the system. And then you kind of start to wonder about just how far you will go down. You've seen clubs before you do worse than that. You've seen clubs bounce back as well, but you just kind of hope and pray that you're the club that bounces back rather than that continues to fall down. So we were kind of entering administration around the same time, and it was a really dark period for the club. There's no two ways about it. It was definitely when we were at our weakest.
And Fryer Tuck, how did you find that relegation under Holloway and then the appointment of Pearson? What was your thoughts on where the club was headed?
I mean Holloway. I really don't like Holloway in all honesty. I mean, especially after that, it just. And then this wise cracking guy, all the quotes and all that, and then he delivers us to that. I mean, mind you, I think we had one of the highest points tallies when we got relegated, but that doesn't exactly help. You've spent your whole history in the first two divisions. You have this proud record, and then that happens. Oh, jeez. I think it's quite ironic that the guy that sent us down would be the guy that comes over, and well, little did we know what exactly was going to happen there. I mean, that's for another time. But once you get relegated, it's very uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen. You could bounce back up, or you could just fade away into nothingness, like a few other clubs. It's a very uncertain thing. So it wasn't. I followed that season, just keeping track and records, and no, I'm just glad that we not only got out, but to take the title there. The only good thing about that was it gave us a chance to redevelop ourselves, especially in the last few years. That was the kick up the backside we needed, and well, we didn't know it at the time, but no, it probably was for the best that we did get relegated at that point. I think we had a lot of lower table finishes up until then, and the club as a whole was going nowhere. So yeah, it worked out for the best in the end, but wasn't pretty at the time.
Well, your comments there remind me of the 2010-11 season for Hull when we were in the relegation zone in the Championship at the start of that season with a certain Mr. Pearson in charge. And it does become quite difficult to sort of reconcile the fact that the club might have slipped down even further. And as you say, Jats, that worry about whether the club can actually bounce back. And so that actually takes me on to that 2010-11 season where Pearson obviously left the club at the start of the season, came across to Hull, and he basically said that it was because he felt that the board didn't really want to keep him at the club and that they'd kind of allowed the owners of Hull to approach Nigel Pearson about managing the club. And you obviously appointed Sousa, who didn't last very long. You then appointed, what's his name?
Sven.
That's it, Sven. And so it was a bit of a volatile time for the club because you got your new ownership from the Thai consortium. Was there a sense that the club was sort of on the way up, or was it sort of a bit uncertain? Obviously, with Sven splashing money here and there for players who might not necessarily have deserved it. What was your take, Fryer Tuck?
It was very sad to lose Pearson because Pearson was really the manager that I connected with at the time, especially after we won the League One title, and I felt that the team had some positivity going around it. If I recall correctly, we lost the playoff, but it looked like we were going places. But yeah, then Sousa came in. Sousa did an all right job at his. I think it was Swansea, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I was at Swansea before. Surely. Was it before was it Martinez there? No, was it Rogers who went after Sousa? I'm trying to remember.
I think it was Rogers that came afterwards.
Yeah.
So Sousa never really had the group. It just seemed like we were going backwards with that step. It's a bit of nowhere, especially after what we just had last season. Pearson built that squad, installed a certain culture, and the players hadn't warmed up to him. And I think it just wasn't working out. And then Swen came, and I honestly thought we were going to go places. I mean, bit naive. I thought we were going to go places. We were going to get we were going to go back to the Premier League. I actually, for a second there, thought he was going to sign David Beckham at points. I mean, he was getting all sorts of other players. I mean, it actually did seem like a realistic possibility. I mean, Beckham wanted to get back into England, and for that he had to come to England, come to England, and if there was one man that was going to get him, it was going to be Swen. And he got Kasper Schmeichel, and I'll be honest, the signing of Kasper Schmeichel was, in my opinion, one of the best signings that I've ever felt as a football fan. I was really pleased with this Kasper signing, because no offense to Chris Wheel, but he was a bit of a dud. Our keepers, as far as I could remember, we've had dud keepers. So to see Kasper Schmeichel rocking up to the box, it was absolutely fantastic. I mean,
he used to play for Manchester City for a bit, didn't he?
I think he had a few games.
Yeah, right at the start. Yeah, so that's a fairly impressive signing for you guys. How did you see that season, Jats, and that sort of transition from Pearson to Sousa to Eriksson, and then obviously back to Pearson, which we'll touch on in a little bit.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for the club. Pearson going was it was a bit hard at the time, but he certainly hadn't showed what he showed later on with us in the second stint. So with the way managers move around now between the leagues and all the clubs, it probably wasn't that much of a shock. I didn't think Sousa was a particularly good appointment, and as it turned out, it wasn't. He'd been okay in a previous role, but just didn't really instill confidence. But I was a little bit like Fryer Tuck with Sven. He, for a club of Leicester's stature, he came with such a reputation, even on an international sense, with his England management, and he came from Mexico as well. I think he just managed before he came to us. So he came with this massive aura about him, and all of a sudden it kind of put Leicester on the map a little bit. And it started, like we've spoken about with Casper, it started to, I guess, make the club a little bit more appealing to those from the outside. He did throw some cash around early on, and there was some very average signings. So for Casper Schmeichel, there was Matt Mills that we signed for $5 million, who we signed from Reading, and at the time I thought was going to be a really good signing, and he turned out to be absolutely hopeless. And then we had Beckford there as well, and Beckford, we got Beckford from Everton.
That's right.
And again, he came. Yeah, he came with this kind of rap. I'd kind of seen him at Leeds, and I had known that he'd been okay in the Championship, and that he wasn't really getting game time at Everton in the Premier League. But thought when he kind of had come in that we were potentially picking up a fairly decent striker. And again, as it turns out, that wasn't the case. So Sven did okay, but he did waste a fair bit of money, and it was an interesting time as well because it was the new owners that was kind of funding that. So they kind of had given him money right off the bat, and he had spent a fair bit of it back at the time. $5 million was a lot of money for a Championship club. It's not these days, obviously, but $5 million was big money back then, and it was on a centre back as well. It wasn't as though we bought this kind of U-boot striker. It was this rocking defence from a fellow Championship club. So it was good time because we come out of League One, and we looked like we were on the up again, but it was a bit of a stalling couple of years.
Yeah, talking about how Pearson sort of improved in that second stint reminds me of, I think we played you guys maybe 2 or 3 games after he returned to Leicester, and the chant from the Leicester supporters was basically, he was only on loan, he was only on loan. So I thought that was quite funny, because it was essentially true. And obviously if he sort of, I guess the common theme I can take from Pearson's 2 spells at both Leicester and at Hull is that he's very, very good at building foundations for squads. You touch on the fact that he won you that League One title, and you obviously had players like Andy King already in the squad in that season. And then he came to Hull and he signed guys like James Chester for a couple of $100,000 from United, and other players of that sort who obviously stuck with us for quite a few seasons and then made us quite a lot of money. Went back to you guys and signed guys like Jamie Vardy, Riyad Mahrez, players of that sort as well. So he has a very good way of building squads and then leaving a very strong legacy at clubs for managers after him to end up taking a lot of credit for things that they didn't necessarily put in place. So he obviously came back to you guys and got you promoted to the Premier League. And there was obviously talk last season about where you were going to end up and all that sort of thing, and most people thought you weren't going to be in any trouble, and you then struggled for quite a chunk of the season. But at the start of that season, how did you guys see your prospects of both staying up and then also what you could actually go on and achieve in the Premier League? I'll start with Jatz.
That was an exciting time as well, to be honest. It was the first time in 10 years we've been back in the Premier League, and it was on the back of such a strong Championship season as well, hitting the 100 points and kind of just dominating that league so much. So I think part of the reason we all kind of expected that, not that it would be easy in the Premier League, but that we might be okay, is that we kind of, with how strong we performed in the season before, we were looking pretty good. We'd obviously had a tight-knit unit, and some of the players were quite good there for the first time in quite a while. So coming up, there was all the optimism in the world that we would be able to stay up pretty well. And the start of the season was brilliant. We had quite a tough start from memory. We played Arsenal and Everton and United, and obviously the United game, that will live long in my memory, that's for sure. Coming back from 3-1 down, I've still got that game on record over in the Foxtel box there, and it's something I pull out every now and then just to kind of sit back and enjoy. So after those 5 games, it looked like we'd kind of, again, maybe not do it easy, but it looked like we were not out of our depth in the Premier League. And then obviously we went through that massive massive down period where we couldn't buy a win even if we wanted to. I remember one match day against Sunderland where we lost 1-0 due to a Cambiasso own goal, I think it was, where basically Wes Morgan cleared it straight into him and it trickled into the corner, and it was like, oh, you've got to be kidding. So there was, I think that was part of the reason why we ended up staying up as well, even though we had such a poor kind of middle part of the season, and it was a massively poor part of the season. We were on the bottom for a long time in that season. But as opposed to like Villa this year, when we were losing, we weren't necessarily playing bad. We were playing with without a bit of luck, and there was just one or two things that maybe weren't going our way. But obviously, it turned around eventually there, and when we kind of got on that run, we really got on that run, and to be honest, that hasn't stopped even to today. That run over since January last year, we're about 25 points better off than any other club in the Premier League, which is. It's just unreal when you look at it. It's it's not even close. It's such an achievement. But obviously Pearson left. Just touching on Pearson, I'll always have a lot of respect for the guy. It's obviously a little bit easier to be objective about it now. I know I got quite defensive, especially with you a couple of times over some of the things he did in that season with MacArthur and all that. And that was probably me just defending our manager a little bit sometimes when he probably didn't deserve it, but. Apart from his hot streak, he's honestly one of the best match day managers I've ever seen. Not just at Leicester, but overall. If you actually watched him in some of those games, change formations, and it's not even just the formation change, but it's the fact that he can call on that formation change mid-half, for instance, and the players will automatically snap to it and play it exceptionally well. He was second to none with that. Even in the run-in that kind of saved us from relegation against West Brom, we changed formation after half-time and turned a deficit into a victory. And it just happened. It wasn't luck, basically. It was happening that regularly. Where if we came out and played a poor half of football, he would switch it around somehow and inevitably get the result. So on top of being able to instill a really good squad belief and balance as well, I guess he was a phenomenal matchday manager. I'm honestly surprised he hasn't been picked up by anyone this season. If Villa are looking for a manager, they could certainly do worse.
I get the sense with him that he's almost being quite calculated in the club that he's going to go to next, because I know there was certainly rumours that he was going to go to Derby, and I think he'd said that he wanted to go to a club with a sort of a plan and a structure that he could actually operate in. So I don't know whether that means he's sort of just waiting for the perfect club, because I mean, as you say, he could basically walk into any club in the Championship, if not lower bit of the Premier League, with the reputation he's sort of built for himself on the pitch, if not off it. What was your take on that season, Fryer Tuck?
Oh man, I thought after the first 5 games, especially after that United actually before that, I thought honestly, because I'll be honest about it, because of where Leicester has been, I hadn't followed the Premier League as much as some of the other guys on the board, and when I first looked at it, I thought we could easily aim for top 10. I was aiming for about 8th place, and then after I saw the United game, then. Whoa! Just like, oh, this is happening. I mean, I knew we had a really good team, as you said. You don't just break 100 points if you're not any good. So the call was there. The togetherness was there. I felt like this was Pearson's kingdom. He had everything all nicely arranged. Everything as he wanted. It just seemed like all the tools were there, and we were on line for a really good season. Then Crystal Palace was a bit of a reality check. The Burnley, the Matty James foul. Why would you do that on the edge of the box? The 2-2, yeah. And then Kasper Schmeichel. Oh, here's a wide, big open gap for you to kick it into, Dorans. Why don't you aim it there? Oh, Jesus Christ! I just had a moment of dread in that Burnley game. I mean. No, after it just seemed so Leicester-like that we would do something like that. And then then pain and misery, and then the Cambiasso own goal against West Brom. Oh God, we couldn't
try a trick. We couldn't take anything. I mean, the talent is there. It's doing it. Why isn't it operating the way that like it did in the championship? How are we below QPR and Burnley? And that's the thing. QPR was hyped up because it's Harry Redknapp. They've got Rio Ferdinand, and they're going to finish very high up. I mean, and then you see us, and then it's like, what exactly happened? We're not going to win the championship and then be sent down like this. This is ridiculous. I mean, Christmas gave us a bit of hope. No offense, but that's
yeah. Well, I mean, I still look back on that game and it's quite interesting because obviously that was a really frustrating loss for us in a run where we'd beaten Sunderland 3-1. Coming from a goal down, and I think we beat Everton after you guys, and you were sort of sandwiched in the middle as that really frustrating loss where we should have won. Especially late in that game, we were throwing absolutely everything at you, and Hernandez really had a few decent chances. But you look back on that game, and I think that was Riyad Mahrez's first goal in the Premier League. So it's sort of a significant game in a few ways, I suppose, as maybe the moment that he sort of took to the league and actually sort of turned a corner. So I suppose it's a significant one in that sense as well.
I would say that was a certain step up. His first goal there, and that win gave us some belief that there is light at the end of this tunnel, because I think we got 7 points in those 3 games, and I mean the Liverpool game was really frustrating. Wes Morgan apparently has a hand on his face. I mean, it could have been something else entirely. I mean, I think I joined the forum around after the. Was it after Villa I joined? I think it was something like that, because I had been watching the forums over this time, and by this point I felt like I wanted to get involved and just share my opinions, and Jatz needed company, being the only Leicester supporter there, so stick together. Who knows? We can get out of this. Looking back, we played some pretty big. We played all right against some of the big teams. Not so much United. Arsenal. We did well. Everton. We did all right at City, Manchester City, if I recall correctly. And then the Tottenham game. Tottenham was a really jammy game, but I felt like that was honestly the first signs that we actually had some life and fight into it. I mean, I think if I recall correctly, once we drew with you guys, we thought that was probably our number, if I recall the mood of the form correctly. Was that right?
Well, that's the frustrating game for us as well, because I think Jelavic had a chance with an open goal to score a goal. I think it was quite early in that one as well. Yeah. And it's sliding doors in a lot of ways, because if Jelavic scores that, you almost suggest maybe we put 3 points more between us and you. It's a bit too much for you to overcome, and we therefore stay up. And it's kind of funny, because if you look at I saw a tweet the other day which made me very, very sad. A year ago, so when Spurs beat Chelsea a year ago that day, Hull and Leicester had been level on points in the Premier League. So it's a very sliding doors sort of situation where obviously Leicester have gone on to these great heights, and you just think, millimetres or inches or whatever it is can just completely change the path of a club in pretty drastic ways. And I mean, it remains to be seen. We could get promoted straight back up, but there's all sorts of other things that could end up happening. It can be pretty amazing what can actually affect clubs in that way. And just to get closing thoughts from each of you to bring it to this season, with the success of Ranieri, a few words on Ranieri, and then also just what does this title mean for you? If you can put it into words, if you can't put it into words, what does it mean for the club, for the city, or whatever you can sort of verbalise, I suppose. I'll start with Jatz.
Well, to start with Ranieri, it's I'm so happy for him. After kind of coming second all those times with various clubs, I'm so pleased that he's been able to finally win the big dance, especially at the club that seemed least likely to do it. With everyone questioning his appointment at the time, at the start of the season, he must have felt he might have been able to block it out okay, but he must have felt fairly lousy with all the negative press that came straight on board. But when you look at what he's done with this squad, I mean, we lost 19 games last season overall in the Premier League. This year we've lost 3 with 2 games to go. It's phenomenal. He came in and he did it perfectly, to be honest. You couldn't ask for a manager to come in and do a better job. He wanted us to still play with the attacking flair that we had last season, especially when we went on that winning streak. But he just brought in this Italian-style defence, and I guess we were quite compact as well that he kind of introduced. And it made the world of difference. It took us about, I've mentioned it on the board, but it took us about 10 games to get our first clean sheet. But since then, we've had like 15 in the last 25 games or something ridiculous, it's incredible when you just look at that number. Like, it's nuts. I just never expected that Leicester would ever be able to do that in the top flight, ever, really. I mean, that's a good result for Manchester City and Arsenal, let alone Leicester. So what he's been able to do this season, I mean, they'll build statues and they'll talk about him forever in Leicester. He's become an absolute legend there for this season alone. And you won't find a nicer guy compared to what we had with Pearson, who I know we've touched on. He's been a good manager, but his attitude and his kind of, I guess, some of his off-field antics, they're like chalk and cheese. Ranieri walks in and says hello to every press staff member, and he's quite charismatic and enthusiastic in press conferences, and it's been a breath of fresh air. So, cannot speak of Ranieri highly enough, and he'll always now be an absolute Leicester legend. As for the title win, I don't even know where to begin with that, to be honest. It was a bit of a surreal feeling, especially with us not playing. So. Watching that second goal go in, my old man ended up watching the last kind of 10 minutes with me, and at the end when the whistle went, he turned around and hugged me and congratulated me, and I realised that was the first time he hugged me in freaking years. So he could tell how much it meant to me. Obviously, you could definitely tell how much it meant to me, and then it was such a weird feeling because normally when you kind of think of that, you'd expect Leicester players to be running around and going nuts, but it was so down at that ground because obviously Tottenham weren't in the mood to celebrate and Chelsea were busy fighting with them. It was an odd feeling, but it still doesn't sink in. Every now and then this week, it's kind of come to me that we're actually champions of England, and when you say the sentence out loud, it doesn't sound real, but it is real now. And I've been seeing the scenes back in Leicester and seeing kind of Gary Lineker talk about it and Birch talk about it as the club ambassador. What it's done for the club is unreal. It's put us completely on the map. Sorry, excuse me. I'm getting too excited. It's put Leicester on the worldwide map, and all of a sudden everyone knows who we are and wants to know our story and all the rest. It's we're in the Champions League now, where we're going to be playing the best competition in Europe, if not the world, and it's a long way from the League One days, isn't it?
Absolutely, and we've been seeing a bit of Gary Lineker this season, and I fear that we'll be seeing a bit too much of him at the start of next season if he holds up his end of the bet and presents in his underwear. And I guess, champions of England, next stop champions of Europe, I suppose. Fryer Tuck, what are your thoughts on Ranieri, and then also just what the title means to you and to Leicester?
Well, Ranieri. Okay, before we go anywhere, there is one person that has not been thanked enough for the situation that we've been in today, in all honesty. And I'd like to give a thanks to John Goodison. If it wasn't for that goal against Greece, we would have never had Ranieri. So thank you, Joel, and thank you to the Faroe Islands. You've done us a fantastic service. But really, as you know, Pearson was the manager that I really connected with my football in life. But just to see we all know what happened in the off season. I mean, we thought, surely nothing. James Pearson, obviously, and I thought surely they'll come to some reconciliation and they'll move on from that. When I saw the news he was sacked, I had to refresh it a few times. I mean, surely this was the Crystal Palace incident all over again after the MacArthur incident.
Well, it did seem to me in a way that it did seem to me that it was almost them looking for an excuse to sack him after some of the incidents during the season that that they'd kind of stuck with him and he'd kept them up, but then they were sort of looking for a reason to get rid of him just because of all of the other indiscretions.
Well, that could possibly be true, but the absolute scale. I mean, if it wasn't James Pearson, the story could have been very well different. But the Thais value their family and their traditions very seriously, and for that to happen, that was looking back, that probably was the death warrant for Pearson right there. It was a very unsettling 2 weeks as we were trying to find our managers. I mean, we were going back to Martin O'Neill, and
which I think Jatz was quite keen on. If I remember from the time.
I mean, well, if you look at the managers that we could have possibly had, I mean, I don't know, the manager of Sacramento in the third division of the American League, good old Precky. Oh, I've just received this job offer from the UK, and I'm going to make my way over there. They still haven't found him. It's just disappeared off the map. Imagine if they put Precky as manager as left. That would have been mad. But thankfully, Ranieri showed the interest early on. And they gave him the job because he was watching that team. He knew that team inside and out. And as we've seen this season, he definitely did. He knew what that team was capable of. I mean, with the squad, the most important thing for the new manager was he had to get the respect of the players. I mean, those players loved Pearson. They loved him a lot. So any new manager had to have that aura of respectability about them. And, well, out of all of the options, the only other exception was O'Neill. So Ranieri was a very good choice in that aspect. But as with his previous tenure with Greece, there was a lot of uncertainty. I mean, I know international management's a lot harder because you don't actually get to see the players. But, yeah, it was very uncertain, but what he did, he didn't change anything. He knew he had a good thing going on from the end of the season, so he just made a few minor changes and just expand upon Pearson's philosophy. The most important fact about Ranieri that separates him from Pearson, why we probably wouldn't have the same season, was basically substitution. With Pearson, you knew what the subs were. You knew when it was going to happen. You knew what the game plan was. With Ranieri, he's more flexible. He's got a lot. He just knows exactly what is needed and just injects it at the right time. And he's got game management. The Villa game in particular. I mean, I know Sherwood contributed some of that, but his substitutes in that Villa game. He made that into a win. It was just absolute genius, and that was pretty much the case throughout the whole season. He was like a more experienced version of Pearson on the field, but off the field, he was your granddad. He was that fatherly figure, all thanks Greece and all the managers. Oh, if the boys get a clean sheet, I'll give them a pizza. And then when they actually got the clean sheet, he turned it into a team-building exercise. Actually got the players to bond even further over that. Oh, you got the pizza, yes, but you have to make your pizza. And it's all these minor little things, just to get that little bit extra out of them. And Pearson did a lot, but Ranieri's style was definitely very different to Pearson, but he got the same results and then some, if you get what I'm saying. So
Yeah, absolutely. And
Ranieri's already a legend. Regardless,
yeah, sorry. So I was going to just say, so what does the title sort of mean for you? I mean, I know we've seen videos of a lot of people in Leicester sort of thanking Ranieri for the title. What does it mean for you?
In all honesty, it finally confirms what I thought was the case 16 years ago. I thought, when I watched my first ever, well, actually my second ever Leicester City game, I thought Leicester City were the best team in England. I actually seriously thought that. Because that's where I got my first actual Premier League experience. There was 2 games. One at the old Filbert Stadium against Sunderland. We won that one 5-2, and then the League Cup final. Unfortunately, my uncle's wife got sick. My aunt got sick for that one, and gave me the ticket, and we saw the League Cup win at the old Wembley, and he actually convinced me that was the Premier League title. And I left England thinking Leicester was the best team in England, and that I was supporting some champion team. And you know what the worst thing was?
What?
I came to England 3 years later, and he convinced me the same thing. He showed me the table. Leicester were, I think, in first or second. We're in first place at the time, and says we're on track to win it again. What I didn't know was it said Division 1. Because Division 1 Premier League. How was I meant to know the difference? So it wasn't until the Invincible season where I actually learned we got relegated, and then it was a Manchester City fan, an actual Manchurian that I went to school with, that had to tell me that Leicester wasn't exactly what I thought Leicester was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, So, I'm finally living the reality that I thought I was living 16 years ago.
That's great. One final question I did actually have for both of you. Do either of you have any plans to head over and catch Leicester City playing in the Champions League next season?
Oh, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about it too much, to be honest, at the moment. I would love to. I really would love to. It might be something I have to think about. I mean, obviously we're in a golden period of our history that may not ever happen again. So I'm already gutted I'm not over there for the celebrations at the moment. But getting to see Leicester in the Champions League is something that may not ever happen again. So I might just head over yet.
Good stuff. What about you, Fryer Tuck?
I would really love to. It's always, I mean, I haven't been to England since 2003, but unfortunately, real life kind of bogged me down, and well, unfortunately, more of the money's going there. But the news that did excite me was the fact that I heard that they were coming to Adelaide to play in what they call the Fairy Tale Cup, because Adelaide also was also at the top table, and they won the A-League as well. So if I was ever going to see a Leicester game, that's probably the way I'm going to do it, because I don't think I'll be going to England for a while, unfortunately. And as I said, I want to go to the new stadium. I want to see a Leicester game in the flesh at the King Power. I mean, the original goal was when they were still in the Premier League, but well, look at the circumstances. And well, even if I got there, I don't think I'd be getting a ticket.
Well, hopefully the club can sort out some Australian supporters for tickets for a couple of games next season, maybe. So we'll see what happens. And at the very least, the game against Adelaide would be quite an interesting one to watch, because as you say, I mean, people have been asking what the comparison would be to in another sport or another competition for the Leicester story, and it does spring to mind that Adelaide did come back from 8 games without a win to start the season, and then ending up not only winning the grand final but also topping the table. So very impressive season from them as well. But we might finish it up there, boys. So thank you so much for sticking around and having a chat about your memories of Leicester over the years.
That's all right. Happy to do it.
I can imagine. And I'm sure everyone will be tuning in to watch Leicester lifting the title against Everton. As you say, Jats, I mean, it still seems a bit surreal, but I imagine when they actually lift the trophy, it'll all sink in, and you know, seeing the players actually celebrating out on the pitch. So looking forward to that one. So enjoy it, boys, and thank you for coming on.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks everyone for listening in. I hope you've enjoyed this segment with a couple of Australian Leicester City supporters who've really enjoyed this season. So until next time, we'll see you on the forums.
As is the work here of Hazard. Costa turns Alderweireld. Hazard! He has done it! He won the title for Chelsea a year ago. He might just have won the title for Leicester City tonight. Eden Hazard, 2-2 at the bridge. William to Hazard. Leicester are champions. Leicester City are champions of the Premier League. The greatest story ever told.